Just work. Just work. PC gaming is getting way too expensive, and if there's a way that we can bring the price down, then I think we should be talking about it. And something that we covered a few months ago was this machine here. It was actually powered by Intel's Arc GPU, something that had a lot of hype, but launched to a little bit of a, well, if I'm honest, a little bit of a fart smell. It was not particularly well received. But you know what? Things have actually changed. There's been quite a few updates for this that's not only give you quite a lot more performance, but hopefully will improve the usability. And I wanted to take this opportunity to actually give you my full experience with Intel Arc, go through some of the pros, but also some of the cons, and yes, there are definitely quite a few, to ultimately help you answer the question that if you are after a more budget-friendly gaming computer, is Intel Arc actually a solid option? We'll be revealing. I'm only joking, it's already in the computer! Oh, I'm so funny, aren't I? Find out absolutely everything you need to know about Arc and whether you should be buying one after a short word from this video's sponsor. Elgato's Stream Deck Plus is here, and it takes your gaming setup to a whole new level. Control lights, volume, color balance, stream settings, and a whole lot more, with 8 programmable LCD buttons, 4 clickable dials, and even an LCD touch bar. It can be as simple as a swap between headset and speakers, or controlling an entire streaming setup with just a single press. Learn more today with the link down below. So okay, here's a quick refresher. Essentially, Intel Arc is Intel's graphics card, and it's meant to compete really with the likes of the nvidia 3060 and 3070. Performance is going to be somewhere in between those two, but the whole idea was that the price of this was meant to be lower, and it would be a much more enticing option. What we've essentially ended up with is a graphics card that will probably run a little bit hotter, and will use a little bit more power consumption than some of its competition, but again, the price should be lower. However, when you actually look at the current market of GPUs at the moment, I honestly don't understand what's going on with Intel. It's almost as if they're not really making that many of these, but I'm sure they are, because there's just not much availability here in the UK at all. And the pricing of this is around about £350-ish, or the one step down from this, the A750, is around about 300. But that's still pretty much the same really as the competition from nvidia and AMD. So unless we see a pricing drop of this very soon, already it's fighting an uphill battle. And here's the thing, right? When I actually installed this inside this rig, and it is a beautiful rig, if you haven't already seen the video, please go check it out in the top right corner of your screen. It was sponsored by ASRock when we made this absolutely beautiful PC, but immediately we had some issues, because as soon as I tried to install the driver, it was actually hanging, it wasn't doing it properly. It did actually install the driver, but it didn't do something that it was supposed to, and it just sort of infinitely hung, and I just had to hope for the best really. And to be fair, it did seem as if the driver was installed, but it definitely wasn't a very good user experience. And this is just a small example of the sort of issues that you're likely to experience if you do go for an Arc GPU, because again, while the performance can be fine, and we'll show you this a little bit later, don't you worry, it's just the software experience is definitely lacking. So just to demonstrate, if I press Alt and I, it does bring up the Intel Arc control unit, if you like, and you've got a few different options. So here you can download your drivers and get something that's up to date, except it currently says updating your experience. Well, it said this for several hours, and I've restarted the PC several times, and I know I have the latest driver because I downloaded it from their website. Great. You've got almost like an nvidia style game library, so you can optimize everything, choose your settings and things. So let's say Overwatch, we'll come here, and you can see some of the settings will come up, except that they're not actually the settings for the game, they're just overriding settings that you can put in through Intel. What and why? Why can't you do the game settings as well? It's just so confusing. There is also this performance tab, so you can see everything that's going on in real time. You can even do a little bit of performance tuning and overclocking, which can work, to be fair. You've got this in-game overlay you can turn on that works, but sometimes it affects your FPS more than it should. And then my personal favourite, you've got Studio that you can use to actually broadcast, capture, and do all of your highlights, which for me is a massive thing. And I use it all of the time on the AMD cards and on nvidia cards to record these videos. And this also has an AV1 coder inside it, which means you can actually use better quality streams and better quality recordings from a lower bitrate, which is great, but usually it's got quite a high overhead on the CPU, which is why you have the hardware encoder on the card. But the thing is, not only is it not enabled by default, you have to go into advanced settings here, and you have to choose it. Oh no, that's broadcast. There we go, look, capture, configure, there we go. And here you can choose AV1, AVC, and HEVC. fantastic. But when I actually turn this on and hit record, it doesn't do anything. It just generates a file that's 300 bytes. It doesn't tell you it's not working. It just puts them all in one folder as well and calls it out. It's just here's the thing, right? As you can tell, I'm getting a little bit frustrating, and we haven't even spoken about performance or anything like that, pricing, value. It's just the thing for me, right, is that PC gaming used to be very, very complicated, but over the years, it's got to the point where it really should be a case of just plugging it in, install the driver, and everything works. And while there's plenty of arguments out there about who's got the better drivers between AMD and nvidia, honestly, both of them are basically the same at this point. There are differences, but both of them work very, very well. They've tried very hard to make it as user-friendly as possible. But with this, it's like stepping back in time 10, 15 years. The drivers don't install properly. When they do, you have to deal with this, and it's just so half-baked from a company that has actually been producing graphics drivers for ages, because of course they've got Intel integrated graphics. And it's just really frustrating. So even if you can get a brilliant deal, you are going to have to deal with all of this. And it's very frustrating. If you're wondering, by the way, how I've actually been recording the things you've just seen, it's been with OBS. There's actually a hardware encoder that you can tap into with the software, and in my experience, this has actually worked fine. And if you look at the overheads as well, it seems to be using the graphics card properly, the CPU barely moves, and all in all, when it works, it works. Are you serious? It doesn't even tell me the FPS. I swear it used to. Am I going mad? I swear it used to tell me the FPS. So I've got my performance telemetry up here, but it doesn't work with frame view, which is what I usually use to monitor FPS. So last time I used Arc, I did need to have this extra menu up, but quite why frame rate's not on here, I don't know. You'd think that's the main thing people want in their inbuilt performance telemetry, right? But what you're seeing here is Cyberpunk 2077. This is running at 1080p at the high preset. I have turned off FSR because I really don't like that at 1080p, so you can get extra FPS if you want, but personally I don't believe in that at the moment. But taking absolutely everything else aside, there's no doubt about it that this is a very playable experience. I mean, £350 is pretty much the cost of an Xbox though, so 1080p is not exactly high performance, but we're clearly getting probably about 50 to 60 FPS actually. I'll get a frame rate counter in just a second. But it certainly feels okay, there's no doubt about that. I mean, what happens if we do turn it up to 1440p, which to be fair is what this card is actually marketed at. Well, we definitely dropped. There was a bug earlier on when some games actually performed better in 1440p than 1080, which was really weird. We've dropped now to about 40 to 45 FPS, I'd say, just based on the feeling. So it's definitely very playable, but again, for the money, I wouldn't say that the value is necessarily here in Cyberpunk. And remember, this is without any ray tracing enabled or anything like that. In fact, if we do want to try a little bit of ray tracing, we can go into the options menu, turn on super resolution now because it's okay at 1440p. But crucially, we're turn the ray tracing on. And I played this game before with just the shadows on, nothing else. And we've definitely lost a bit of FPS. We're now probably about 30 to 35 frames a second. So this is definitely at the limitations, if you like, of the Arc GPU. Whereas if you were playing this on an nvidia card, so something like a 3060, I would argue that 1080p, full ray tracing, DLSS is going to be very attainable. So not only would you be getting a better software experience there, but in the specific nvidia titles, if you like, I think you are just going to have a much better overall experience. Oh, hang on a minute. Good guy Reddit. Someone has given me a brilliant suggestion. Look, we can use the Xbox Game Bar. There we go. Was I right? Our FPS is actually around about 52 FPS with ray tracing. So there you go. So the question now though is that higher than it was a second ago? Because we were just recording and I've stopped that. So if we now start recording in OBS, go back into Cyberpunk. Okay, no, it actually does seem to be about the same actually, still around about 47 to 50 FPS or so. Goes to show I was actually underestimating. Clearly I'm used to high refresh rate monitors. So yeah, around about 47 FPS, 1440p with some ray tracing. That's not actually too bad, is it? Again, I still think you'd have a better experience if you like on a 3060. That is better than I thought it would be. I'm actually slightly impressed. What was it without ray tracing? 1440p. Not dramatically different actually, about 5 to 10 FPS more. So yeah, maybe you will want to try a little bit of ray tracing, but There was only the shadows, so it's not like the image quality is going to be drastically different. But okay, 1440p, 60 FPS, high settings in the Cyberpunk. Not too bad. Let's jump into our next title though, some Warzone 2, and when I tested the original Warzone on this PC, this was one of the quirkiest games I think I tested, because it didn't really seem to change depending on the resolution or settings or anything, and we were just getting a lot lower FPS than I would have expected. But I'm using this as a bit more of a test to see whether we can actually drive this monitor, which is 4K, but use the new Intel XESS technology. So this is set to the lowest possible render for 4K, which is performance. And in terms of frame rate, oh, it doesn't actually say what we're getting. That's a bit annoying. It just says loading. Oh, but this actually feels pretty good. I would wager we're probably looking at about 80 to 90 FPS here, which, bear in mind we are upscaling to 4K, is actually fairly impressive again. I think what we saw before was around about 80 to 100 FPS in Warzone 1, but now this is a lot more optimized. We should see over the 100 FPS mark, which is what most people are going to be after, really, in a multiplayer title. Oh, performance tab's not working now, for goodness sake. Oh, and frame view doesn't work either. It's just a nightmare. Come on, come on. Why? I mean, this is the moment of truth, isn't it? Can I actually help out my teammate? No. But I'm trying to friggin' sort out getting a FPS thing on screen. Oh, honestly. Why do I start these things? But I mean, this is exactly the sort of thing that I'm talking about. Why can't it just work out of the box? It'd be so simple. Just press a button, FPS comes up. You don't have to do all these workarounds and then find that the workarounds themselves don't work properly. Honestly, I've just spent, what, 45 minutes trying to get a frame rate counter to work. Restarting the PC was the best option. MSI Afterburner, Reva Statistics, none of that was working either at all. Nvidia Frame View wasn't working, even though I looked up that it worked for me a little bit before. Honestly, I'm getting frustrating. But yes, here we go. And this is 4K Performance XESS. And this is running actually at quite high settings. So I would say 60 FPS isn't too bad, but we are seeing a little bit of dropping. So it's not a surprise, is it, that this card can't handle 4K resolution, even though it's sort of faux 4K resolution, right? But I did want to include this in there just to sort of show you the limitations, if you like, of the GPU, as well as to actually compare against some of the higher resolutions. So yes, about 50 to 60 FPS, 4K XESS on performance. But we are getting some weird artifacting as well. Could just be the game. Let's give it the benefit of the doubt, shall we? Okay, 1440p XESS set to performance mode. So the game actually looks quite good. I think XESS does a very good job. Brilliant, just as we get mode down. But yes, 80 frames a second. Is that enough from what is set to performance mode when it comes to XESS? I know we can turn some of the settings down, and it is still a good frame rate. I don't think there are too many people out there that would complain about 90 frames a second or so, but it's not necessarily as high as I would like if you're buying a brand new graphics card in 2023 that costs around about, what, £350? I don't know. Let me know down in the comment section below what you think. And now I'm looking back at the recording, I can see the frame rate counter doesn't appear on the recording. I'm going insane here, guys. I'm going insane. Right, we've restarted it again, and this time we're going to play some Apex Legends. And for whatever reason, NVIDIA Frame View seems to be playing ball. So you might actually get to see the frame rate for once. Unbelievable, techers. Thank you. But once again, we are now jumping out of a plane, but this time it is, of course, Apex Legends. And this is running at 4K at just under max settings, and suddenly the frame rate is blowing my mind. I know this isn't the highest we've ever seen, but still, around about 75 FPS at 4K from a card that's not really supposed to be playing 4K really isn't too shabby at all now, isn't it? This is an incredibly impressive experience, actually, and not one that I expected. I mean, it depends what you play, right? But clearly, if you're going to be playing something that is a bit more of a lighter title, something that has good compatibility, I have to admit, I thought we were going to get less than this, bearing in mind that all of the tests that we've done so far have either been boosted with XESS, or of course been a little bit lower because we've got ray tracing and things on with Cyberpunk. Not too bad. I mean, we're actually now getting 100 FPS. 100 FPS at 4K. So maybe if you're a die-hard Apex Legends player, then it is worth considering an ARC GPU. Well, let's turn this down to 1440p now, shall we? And see what difference that makes. Actually, not a massive one. We are getting slightly higher FPS, and it is going to be a whole lot more consistent, but it's nothing I would say is particularly crazy. What you'd normally see is completely different FPS figures at all of the different resolutions, but we don't actually see it that often. It doesn't line up with nvidia and AMD when it comes to the performance differences at different resolutions, which I don't know if that means maybe it outperforms at higher ones or whether it's just underperforming at lower, or maybe it's a bit of both. It's certainly piquing my curiosity, but regardless, if you want to play Apex Legends, that's your game, then actually I can safely say, hand on heart, that an Arc GPU is a very good option, assuming you can get it for the right price. Are you actually serious? It hasn't recorded it with the overlay, which was the whole point of frame view. I know it's so niche, but honestly, I have not been more frustrated testing a system or testing GPUs than I have with Arc. I mean, at least the story at the end of the day is that you can get the gaming performance out of it that you want it, but it's just the software. The software lets it down so much that you're just gonna be left frustrated a lot of the time. And it's just, for a product that costs about £400, 350, whatever it is that you get it for, it's just so deflating. Oh, goodness sake. One more game, and now frame view's not showing up at all. It's as I say, it's laughable. However, despite the lack of a frame rate counter, honestly, I don't think I need it, because I think if this isn't 120 FPS, I will eat my hat. And I know I've said that before, and you guys have commented that you never see me in a hat, so maybe I don't have one, but I assure you I've got quite the collection. The game looks and feels incredible. This is 1440p running with XESS, and I think XESS actually is a very impressive technology. It seems to not be buggy from what I can tell. Maybe it was at launch, but here it seems to be working without a hitch. And I would argue this looks very close to 4K resolution. Yet it's not. As I say, it's not even 1440p, right? It's upscaled to 1440p. So it does do a good job when it gets it right. I just wish it got it right more often. And, you know, for me, not being able to hook a frame rate counter in very easily is clearly a bit more of an issue than it is going to be for you guys, but it's still going to be annoying. People want to know how their game performs, and if you can't get things to run properly, it is going to be a pretty frustrating experience. But I'm actually keen to see what happens now if we turn ray tracing on. I mean, here are your settings though, 1440p, while recording, remember, with AV1, XESS it to quality, so actually that's why it looks so good, because it's set to high quality. But let's have a look. If we go ray trace reflections, will this be able to handle it? Well, the only options are high or very high actually, so let's just leave it at high and run again and see what happens. Well, the frame rate has decreased by quite some margin actually. It now feels slow, you know, which isn't what you want flying across the rooftops in Spider-Man. So you could play like this, but you can definitely feel the increased latency. This is something nvidia talk about all of the time now, but it is actually really important, because while I wouldn't say it looks drastically different, and what you're seeing is obviously 30 frames a second, so it's not going to look drastically different, but it's just not the way I would want to have this game feel, really. So I think this is what I said actually in the previous video. Like, while this card can run ray tracing, I don't think the ray tracing is necessarily fast enough for you to turn it on a lot of the time. I'm interested to see what happens next time round with Intel GPUs, but I think they have to handle their launch and handle their software and drivers better than they are at the moment, because as you can tell, this has been a pretty mediocre experience, shall we say. Whilst you definitely can extract all of the performance out of this, I don't think I would be happy with an Arc GPU. That's the truth of it. I mean, if I could buy this card for like 200 quid, yeah, that would be worth it. But unless we see a drastic price drop, we see availability increase a lot, and that we see more consistent performance across a range of games and a range of resolutions, because while something like Spider-Man clearly runs fantastically well on Arc, as we saw earlier, it's not the case with everything, and it's just quite unpredictable, which is something I thought would have changed since the last driver update. And while things have definitely improved, we're not quite at the stage where I think it's very easy to recommend. But next time there's a driver update, I guess we'll cover it again, and maybe we should do like a full budget GPU showdown where we actually compare all of the Arc GPUs to, I guess, their competition in much, much greater detail, and we can give you the value proposition so you can decide what's the best option for yourself. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on Arc. Is this the sort of card that you think is going to change things in the future for AMD and nvidia and make it more difficult? Or is it a little bit too little too late? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this video, get yourself subscribed, and why not grab yourself a PC-centric mouse mat? Link to this and everything included in this PC is in the description down below. And while you're down there, why not grab the brand new Elgato Stream Deck Plus? This awesome gadget makes your life so much easier, with customizable controls for pretty much any aspect of your gaming setup. I use mine to control Philips Hue, Nanoleaf, Elgato Studio Lights, PC lighting, and much more. Learn what you can do with the Stream Deck Plus today with the link down below. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch you in the next one.